We have confirmation that the Eagles have an offensive and defensive coordinator. We've met them. We've spoken with them. They've talked to us. It was a big deal.
Yeah, they're real people. It's been a few months since they got hired, and we were finally allowed into the NovaCare auditorium to actually speak with them this afternoon.
Yeah, and to be fair, it's not the first time we've seen them. We saw them at rookie camp. We saw them on the stage after the draft. Thought about running one of them down and getting a few questions. And didn't do it then, but talked to them today, and we have a lot to break down.
We sure do.
All right, this is Eagle Eye Podcast presented by Nissan. He's Reuben Frank. I'm Dave Zangaro. Let's just go down the order here. We talked to Vic Fangio, the new defensive coordinator, Kellen Moore, the new offensive coordinator, and Michael Clay, our old tried and true special teams coordinator, been around now for a while. But we'll kind of go in that order. I think Fangio was the big ticket hire this offseason. Right. A guy who's been in the league for a long time. They've used a lot of his philosophies with Jonathan Gannon and then obviously Sean Desai last year. But now they had the creator of this defense. He says it's his last stop.
Yeah, it was interesting. And I actually covered the Philadelphia Stars teams that he started with under Jim Mora back in the early 80s at my first paper. We covered the Stars, who were a pretty good team.
Did you ever have any run-ins with him?
I don't remember.
You don't remember, yeah.
It was a long time ago. I don't think we really – I think we mainly just talked to Mora. I don't remember talking to any of the assistant coaches. But, I mean, it wasn't like I was like there were no beat writers. He just kind of came down once a week for a press conference and then went to the games. So things were different back then. Like there weren't cell phones. There wasn't the internet and all, things were a little different. But
the horse and buggy would take a while to get
it was a little slow. Getting over the Walt Whitman Bridge hadn't been built yet, so you had to take a raft across the river to cover
with Walt Whitman.
Exactly, Walt would be out there rowing. But yeah, he said, that was my first stop, and this is going to be my last. He was very blunt about that, and he did say, "You never know in this business." I've learned that, but I'm hoping it'll be my last stop. 40 years and started here and finished here. He said he still eats his meals at Palladium around the corner from here. It's a good place. He seems to like it. He's got family in the area, but he's a really interesting guy, and he's a lot more forthcoming, I think, than most of the coaches that we've been around.
He's earned that.
He sure has. Yeah, kind of like Jim Johnson. Those the old codgers, they have nothing to lose by being honest. And it was good to talk to him.
There's something about a grizzled, curmudgeonly defensive coordinator that I like.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Yeah, we really haven't had that in a while.
Jim Schwartz.
No,
he wasn't old, but he was grizzled.
He acted old. Yeah. He acted like an old-time coach, but he wasn't that forthcoming.
Certainly not. I mean, Fangio was very honest about things today, just about his arrival here. Yeah. I mean, he basically said that as soon as he ended things in Miami, he already knew he was coming here.
He did say that.
Which is, the Eagles have tried to deny that, but it was pretty apparent. I mean, the reporting around it was presented this stuff.
The same tweet that announced he was leaving Miami said he was coming here. So it was like...
He was a strong candidate to come here, I believe was the phrasing.
Yeah, that's like, just say he's a strong candidate. Don't say it's a done deal till tomorrow. Then you get twice the breaking news tweets that way.
But then he took it a step further because he was asked about the end of 2022, because he was obviously a consultant here. He was asked about the end of 2022, and Jonathan Gannon obviously left very late in the process. We don't have to get back into all that, but had the timing worked out, we thought that there was a good chance Fangio would have been the defensive coordinator here. He agreed with that. He said it's a fair assumption.
Yeah, he did. He did. I did not expect that answer from him, but he confirmed it. And we kind of knew that, but it's certainly interesting to hear him say it the way he did.
Yeah. It's nice. It's like refreshing in a way.
It is. Yeah, it is. And
he was also asked about the end of his time in Miami, which is a very fair question. We've heard reports and some there's been that, him and the players, there was like a disconnect there. They didn't get along. He ruffled some feathers. They didn't really like him, apparently. He said he doesn't know. He's like, I don't know. I thought it was okay. I don't think that was an issue.
Yeah. He said, I didn't sense that.
Yeah. I think that probably was an issue.
Could have been.
But when you're, they're winning every game, it's probably not.
Yeah.
But it does kind of get into like the old school mentality of Vic Fangio versus the NFL in 2024
and versus Nick Sirianni.
Yeah, and Vic kind of acted like he didn't understand why there would be some questioning about him and Nick getting along. But I mean, they are kind of very different personality wise. And then we got into some of the talk about modern NFL schedules and workload. And it seems kind of like definitely opposed to what Vic would prefer.
Yeah. I mean, Nick's philosophy is the antithesis of what Vic described as his personal preference. And he said, he basically said, you need longer practices, which I wonder if that's something Nick was considering in any way, just based on the way last year ended. I don't know. But he said, you need to give these guys more, and they can handle it, and they'll like it, and they'll understand why we're doing it, with the assumption that, the unspoken part of it is if they don't, they're not going to be here. And they probably do need that. So, and he was asked, does your philosophy, it seems like the antithesis of Nick's? And he said, well, that's something we've talked about and we'll talk about.
Yeah. And he made it seem like he's definitely been pushing for more practice time. And I think there are real reasons for that. It's not that he wants to be a hard ass, but he's trying to install his defense, and even talked about wanting to install maybe even more than they need, because I think he said in week 3, we might need a different element of our defense. If we don't install it in training camp, we're not going to be able to use it. So,
and I like what he said along those lines about how, and look, this is an obvious thing, but not all coaches subscribe to this. We're going to be facing different kinds of offenses. So we need to play different kinds of defense. And not all coaches do that. This is the way I coach, and this is what we're going to do. And his thing is, whatever's going to work against the offense that we're facing, that's what we're going to do.
Certainly within a framework, though, because he has a defense. He has a scheme.
Sure.
And it's well documented. The Eagles do have a minicamp this year, a mandatory minicamp. They have not had that under Nick Sirianni. So
they had it scheduled.
They had one scheduled once, but that's a tangible change. I mean, they're going to practice more this spring than they have in previous years. And I wonder how much of that was Vic Fangio's influence. Now, some of it's obvious, right? You have 2 new coordinators. You're coming off a disappointing end of a season. You probably do need to practice more, but I'd imagine Fangio has some weight in that building.
Yeah, I would think so. And obviously you can't just have the defense practicing. So if they're practicing longer, it's going to be Nick's offense too, which he, his first few years here hasn't been the case. So,
and look, it's worked for them for the most part.
It has.
They didn't practice very much in 22.
They didn't, and they went to a Super Bowl. So I'm really curious to see what that looks like. Maybe you'll see I forget the green practice. I forget which one was the longer one. The yellow.
Green
was the longer one, right? Maybe the green will get longer by half an hour, 45 minutes, and the short ones will stay short. Maybe it'll be something like that. I don't know. How
do you think the players are going to react to it?
I think it might be hard for some guys.
Yeah. You remember back, there was way back when where they the players negotiated their way out of a mandatory minicamp.
But I also think this is a much younger team than it was last year. They have a lot more younger players who might be, the whole thing about longer practices is more chances for older guys to get hurt. Anyone can get hurt in practice, but I just think a younger roster in general is more conducive to longer practices. And I think that might all go together. It
might. I'm a little curious about it, though, because you kind of get used to doing it a certain way. And
we won't know because we don't get a practice schedule. They tell us what day to show up, and we don't know if they're going to be out there, 45 minutes or 2 hours. Well, it won't be 2 hours.
Well, I think we might know a little bit by the schedule, though, because they've kind of leaned into the sports science, and it was a lot of non-back-to-backs.
Right.
In training camp. I'm curious if that changes.
There were a lot of walkthroughs.
It was a lot of every other day in training camp. It kind of took the grind
then
out
they added a day at the end that gave them 3 days in a row, maybe for the first time. That's a great point. I still think, this franchise has a lot invested in sports science, and I think they'll still take some of that into account. I think they'll still be built in days off. You have to have some. They've always had more than required, but it's going to be really interesting to see how it looks.
And I wonder how much a walkthrough matters to Vic versus a practice. Because if you're trying to install a defense, a walkthrough can be a really useful tool. Sure. You can actually kind of go through things quicker than you can in a real practice. But it's not practical. Like, I wonder how he views that. We didn't have a time for a ton of questions today.
He doesn't seem to be the walkthrough type. But I mean, look, the league, tells you how many days you can practice with pads and all that. So a lot of it's out of his hands. But
we know that Nick Sirianni views a walkthrough as sometimes more valuable than a practice.
Yeah, you get twice as many plays. They're full speed to the ball, to the snap. Yeah, it's. I think the one thing we can agree on is that they're going to practice more. I mean, I think it's just going to be a matter of how much more. I don't think that's a bad thing.
I don't either, but I think it does need to kind of be a blend of what they've done versus what they're going to do.
Yeah.
And then I do think you have to worry about the team dynamics of it. And also, like, we'll get into the offensive stuff a little later, but I mean, Nick has done things a certain way. And I kind of wonder if changing that makes players view him differently and his role with the team.
It's interesting. Maybe Nick will just send the offense in and the defense will just keep practicing for the last half
go
hour.
Over well.
Yeah.
I can just picture BG yelling, "Where are you going?"
Ooh. Yeah. I like Vic.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's all.
He reminds me a little Jim Johnson, just his
demeanor.
Yeah.
He talked about his defense a little bit. He didn't get into it too much. If we had a little truth serum, I'd wonder what he'd say about all the copying of his scheme.
Yeah, he kind of played it down.
He played it down. He said, they're not taking it whole. Well, he's like mostly not taking it all. He's like, they're taking elements. Like, everyone does that, but I'd imagine it makes his life a little more difficult.
Yeah.
The more, like, it's kind of become the thing in the NFL, or at least it had been for a long time. Is like a lot of what he was doing, the staples of his defense became popular around the league. And the more teams see it, I wonder if it becomes less effective. Yeah,
that's always the risk. And he said, we're always making adjustments and changes and adding things, taking things out, and it evolves. So I'm sure there's something to that. And I think anything it's going to work better when the master is the one operating it. But I think it is an issue, a potential issue.
It's very funny because a year ago we were sold on the idea that, but Sean Desai worked with him. That's way different than watching it on tape. He worked with the guy. He should be able to do it.
Yeah. And he was asked about the way last year ended. He's like, I wasn't here,
That's a tricky one to answer.
Yeah. But I mean, he said it's never just one thing, which is true. But I'm sure he watched that tape. He watched that tape, though.
Yeah. At least since he's been hired, he watched it.
Yeah. So, yeah.
The other thing he talked about was when you have a young, versatile defensive player, like, where do you want to play them and how do you want to handle it? And obviously we're talking about Cooper DeSean here, right? Like, there's no question that that's who he's talking about, but he said they want them to have like one primary position and then a secondary. So with Cooper, I'd imagine it's the primary is the outside corner and then the secondary would be nickel corner.
Yeah. And Howie's mentioned at least 3 times that they've never seen Cooper play safety. So I'm guessing that'll be a little farther in the future. I think eventually that we'll see that.
They don't have safeties, Rube.
Yeah, they don't have a lot of safeties.
They have 4 safeties on their 90-man roster right now.
Yeah, I think Eric Zomalt's coming back on a futures deal. But yeah, it's he also said he likes throwing a lot at people too.
Mm-hmm.
So
and by all accounts, Cooper DeSean's smart kid. He can handle a lot.
Yeah. So I think you'll see him. I think outside and inside. I think outside corner first. I think inside corner will follow quickly, and then at some point you'll see him get some safety.
Yeah, I think there are other guys that have 2 at corner who can play safe. They're going to have to in practice. I mean, they don't have the bodies, but like McCoy Gardner.
McCoy Gardner looks like a safety.
Big guy. Yeah, he could play some safety. I think Avonte Maddox can play safety. I've always liked Avonte at safety. The problem is he might be their best bet at nickel right now too.
Yeah.
Although they have more options. If you have Cooper, maybe Cooper's your best option at nickel. Then maybe you can move Avonte back to safety.
Yeah. I worry about, Avonte just being healthy. Like, you can plan all you want, but like, what are the odds he's going to, plus at safety, he's probably more physical than, it's probably similar to the slot.
Yeah, but I'm thinking about him as like a backup at safety and nickel.
Yeah.
At this point, because if your starting safeties are CJ Gardner-Johnson and Reed Blankenship, and then you have Sidney Brown coming back in the mix.
We don't know when, though.
You don't know when, but like Avante could start the season as a backup safety. He could also be the backup nickel. He could maybe play some nickel here and there if Cooper's not ready to be the starter at that spot. I think Avante could be a useful player on this team.
I don't disagree with that, and I like the player. I just don't know how you can count on him even making it to the starting line healthy. I mean, we'll see.
Sure. I mean, but the idea is if he's a backup, he's not playing that much anyway.
Sure.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah, there's some options there.
Other stuff from Vic, he was asked about his staff and didn't get into the individuals on the staff, but he did talk about obviously Jeremiah Washburn is still here. That's good.
Yeah, not a lot left from the previous staff, but Wash is here. I think he's a good coach.
Yeah, he's saying the inside linebackers coach he didn't know from Adam until they hired him. But the other guys, Clint Hurt, the defensive line coach, and Christian Parker, the defensive backs coach, and even like Joe Casper was here for a little bit. Like
right.
He knows all those guys. He said that's not the reason he hired them. He hired them because he thinks they're good coaches. Of course, the only reason he knows that is because he's worked with them before.
Right. So
some real experience on the defensive side of the ball. That's a big difference.
It sure is. That staff was too young, too inexperienced last year. I sensed. I thought it was. I asked Vic about. I mean, look, for a lot of these guys, he's their fourth defensive coordinator. I mean, look, you go Gannon at the end of 22, then you have two guys last year, and then Vic, and for a lot of them, it's three position coaches, and that's a lot. And he said it is a challenge to overcome that, and it's just something that, I mean, you have all these phrases and voices floating around your head, especially for a younger player. I don't think that's an easy thing to. So that's something he's going to have to work through. I don't think it's a huge problem, but I think it's something that we're going to hear a lot about over the summer. Different voices, every coach has his own way of expressing things.
Really on both sides of the ball, they're dealing with that right now.
Yeah. They just only had one OC last year. They had two DCs. So, yeah. I mean, I think it's like Avante's now had four DCs in his last 6 games, like over a period of his last 6 games, which is nuts.
He was asked about linebacker, which is always a topic of conversation here.
And he has something in common with Eagles fans.
What's that?
He didn't know who they were.
He got lost a little bit. He was having trouble coming up with the names, but he did. I thought it was curious that he mentioned Zach Bond having the ability to play inside backer. And from the time they brought in Zach Bond, I think all of us looked at Andrew Van Ginkel in Miami and thought, well, he's filling that role. He's kind of a hybrid off-ball edge rusher who can get after the quarterback. I still see him that way.
Yeah.
But it stuck out to me that he mentioned Bond.
It might have been, and this isn't a knock on Vic, but it might have been because that's the first name he thought of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then he got into Devin White. Mentioned he's had a good career, had a down year last year.
Yeah.
N'Kobe on the mend. Trotter had to be brought up to him, and I think that's just because he's a rookie.
Sure. Yeah. He didn't mention Ben Van Sumeren. It was interesting.
Yeah.
To
be fair, no one mentioned Ben either.
Right.
We helped him out with Oren Burks and Trotter.
Yeah. Of course, I was there, yelling like Tracy White and stuff like that. But
Najee.
Najee Good. Well, Najee Good's dad played for the Eagles, so one of only 3 combinations. Well, it will be once Trottett's on the field. I think it's the Goods, the Ragers, and the Trotters, the only father-son combinations in Eagles history.
Oh.
Yeah, John Good was a tight end in the Vermeil era.
That's fun.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what I figured out today? And this has nothing to do with anything we're talking about.
I'm shocked.
I started wondering who's caught the most touchdown passes in Eagles history, but only caught touchdown passes from one quarterback.
So he couldn't have even caught one from a different quarterback.
Right. All from one player.
Why in the world did that come to your mind?
I don't know. I was just curious.
Okay. What's the answer?
The answer is T.O. All 21 from Donovan. Yeah. And then Jeff Thomason, Wilbert Montgomery is second with 12, all from Jaworski. And then Jeff Thomason is third with 7, all from Donovan.
How long did it take you to look that up?
Way too long. Don't even ask. Way too long.
Do you ever wonder like what you could
What's
have
wrong with
done
me?
like in that time?
Every day.
Yeah, we're going to work on time management with you a little bit, I think.
Like once I have it in my mind that I'm curious about it, then I can't stop myself.
Okay.
I have to.
Did you feel like satisfied at the end of it?
I did.
Okay. As long as you felt good about it.
Yeah.
I think I would have gotten to the end and been like, why did I just do that?
You know what? I'm going to turn it into an observation this weekend.
Okay. So you're going to use it.
Only 9 to go. I will use it.
Okay. That's good. Sorry. Spoiler for 10 Obs this week.
Yeah.
Anything else from Vic that stood out?
No.
Okay. Let's take a break. And then we'll talk about Kellen Moore and Michael Clay on the other side.
You deserve a car that thrills you, a car that puts goosebumps on your goosebumps. At Nissan, we got everything from turbocharged SUVs to 100% electric vehicles that'll make your heart beat faster. Experience the thrill for yourself and shop your local Nissan store at nissanusa.com today.
Celebrity cook Steve Martorano brings his Italian-American cooking back home to Philly. Enjoy Martorano's Prime at Rivers Casino and Steve's famous meatballs with Sunday gravy, prime steaks, and more. Make reservations at Martorano's Prime on Open Table. All right, Rube, let's talk about Kellen Moore.
I won't do that. No. I won't hold it up.
Oh, okay. I thought, yeah.
All right. Yeah, Kellen Moore.
It was good talking to Kellen Moore a little bit.
It was.
We have some big takeaways. We have some not so big takeaways. Do we start with the big? Do we work our way up?
Let's start with the big.
Start with the big. I think the one thing we've been really curious about, it's been like my biggest curiosity all offseason is the blending of these offensive systems. Because initially it seemed like it's not going to be Nick's offense anymore. They're going to bring in an offensive coordinator to run the offense. Everything's going to change. Then the next time we talked to Nick, it was, well, we did a lot of good stuff. It's going to be a blending of these offenses. And that's kind of where we sit. And that didn't change talking to Kellen Moore on Thursday. It's going to be blending of these systems. And now we're getting into the thick of it. And it seems like the verbiage is a really important part of the whole process.
Yeah, and he used the word clean, like 100 times. That's like his go-to word. And he talked about the verb. Is it verbiage? Verbiage. I was under the impression it's verbiage. Alex, what's the word? But his point was that you have to make it all connect and all make sense together, even if you're bringing in stuff from different systems. He said that's kind of the trick to it. Which makes sense. I mean, it has to be one system of verbiage, which it can be tricky when you're bringing in, stuff from two different offenses. So I think that's kind of what they're working on now. And he said, he was talking about it and he said, there was stuff that worked last year. They do have some good stuff. So there's
don't want to get rid of the good. He kept saying,
don't want to get rid of the good, which I get. But I think it's a tricky thing. And I think look, he wasn't as forthcoming as Vic, certainly, but he's a young guy. He's not going to be like that. But I think he made it clear that it's not the simplest process, and it's something they've been spending a lot of time on, like making it seem like it's one offense, not it's coming from different places.
Yeah, and I think that's tricky. And I asked him, what's the most challenging aspect of blending philosophies? And he went right to the language of it all. Yeah. And I think the fact that he brought that up is interesting. And he mentioned that some of what they do from a verbiage standpoint, I think it's verbiage. Yeah. Verbiage.
Rube is correct. According to Alex.
I think there's alternate pronunciations. Anyway.
There's right and there's wrong.
That's not always true.
In this
anyway.
case, it is.
I thought it was notable that he brought up that was the challenging aspect of it. But then he also mentioned that some of what they're using is from the Eagles under Nick Sirianni. Some of it is from him, whether it was in LA or Dallas. And then there's the third category, which is
between LA and Philly, he said.
So where would that be? New Mexico.
Yeah, they're going to run the New Mexico offense.
I was thinking
the
between
Lobos.
Dallas and LA. Between LA and Philly would be
probably be Wichita.
Okay. Yeah. So they're now, but I think it's tricky. And he even said you might have a term for something, but you want to make sure that term is not used for something else in a different play.
Right.
So you're kind of like cross-checking this whole thing. You don't want to end up in a situation in training camp where you have a guy running the wrong route because he thinks it's a different play or a different,
or in a game. Yeah.
Well, certainly. Yeah. Hopefully you'd figure that out before the game, but
it's not an easy thing. And there's so many plays, and these the names for plays are so long and so many things go into it that it becomes a major undertaking. Yeah.
So I think that was probably the biggest takeaway is how they're doing that. There were some other ones. He was asked about motion, which is been a big deal. And I think sometimes it's overblown, but it's not nothing. I mean, the Eagles were dead last in the NFL last year in pre-snap motion, and the Chargers were top 10, and traditionally Kellen Moore's offenses have been top 10. So Nick didn't do it for a reason, and Kellen has done it for a reason. I think those are two elements of these offenses that it probably is tricky to blend. He was asked about the benefits of it, and he said, obviously, like, you can tell some things about a defense with the motion. Like,
that was interesting. Yeah.
Well, I mean, that's the part that Nick has always brought up, is that you can, but Nick would always say there's other ways to find out that information, which is true. But the second part to me was more important of what Kellen said. He said it can also stress the defense, which is, yeah, of course it can. That's why the Shanahan offense is what it is, right? It puts stress on a defense. And obviously Nick knows that he's not a dummy, right? He knows that it can do that. He clearly didn't think the juice was worth the squeeze there. Kellen does. So I think we're going to see more motion this year.
I don't think there's any question.
We have to. I mean, they were dead last in the league, and they're talking about how stagnant the offense is. A pretty easy way to refresh it. And I know Nick's thing has always been, don't do it just to do it, but there are real tangible reasons to do it. And I think Kellen gets that.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And Kellen talked about, disguising things. So run pass looks the same when there's motion, and he seems to feel pretty strongly about it. So
yeah, there are so many elements of Nick's offense that were very simple, and that's not always a bad thing.
Right.
But when you're stagnant, it is.
Right. Right. And they were too slow to change.
I don't think they had those answers built in. They don't do it.
Right. Right. So yeah, I think fans are going to be happy to hear his answer to the motion thing.
I think so.
And look, I get it. I mean, I think
it's not a cure-all.
No, but it can help. It can help. I mean, the more unpredictable you are, the more effective you're going to be, period. Mm-hmm. And they have so many weapons, and finding different ways to get them open and to scheme them can only help.
Other stuff from Kellen Moore I have on my list here. Talked about Doug Nussmeier a little bit, whereas, on defense, most of the staff turned over. On offense, it didn't. I mean, they kept most of their offensive coaching staff. They kept Jeff Stoutland. They kept Aaron Moorhead. They kept Jamal Singleton. They kept Jason Michael. The one big change was quarterbacks coach. They bring in Nussmeier, who has a history with Kellen Moore. And I think a big reason is because he knows how important it is to have the quarterback hearing the right voices. And he says he doesn't want to clutter the quarterback. He can trust Doug Nussmeier to be in the room with him.
Yeah, and he's certainly a lot more experienced. So yeah, Nussmeier he played a lot of years, right? He didn't play much, but he was in the league a long time. I think it's a tricky thing, finding the right QB coach. And again, it comes back to the whole thing about Jalen having a different QB coach and a different play caller every year of his life, except 21 to 22. But that's a really important relationship. And I mean, I don't know Doug Nussmeier, and we'll see how it goes, but it's a really important hire and a really important relationship between him and Kellen and him and Jalen.
I had a question that didn't get into Kellen Moore.
It was tough getting questions in today.
It was. We all came kind of guns a-blazing.
Weren't that many people there, but I think, we just had like 4 months of questions saved up for these guys.
Yeah. So the one I didn't get to was, we heard Jalen this offseason talk about how much he yearns to have stability and an offensive staff. Curious if that changes anything about their approach with him.
How so?
I don't know. I don't know if you teach it differently knowing what he's been through. There's probably like some scar tissue there and a little bit. Like, right. Do you kind of rely on what he's already learned? Do you make him wipe the slate clean? Do you kind of really listen to him for input, knowing that he's been exposed to so much?
Yeah. It's interesting because Jalen made an unusually big deal about it. So it's obviously something that is very important to him.
For him, an unusually big deal is just answering the question.
Yeah, but I mean, it was really as open and forthcoming as he's ever been.
I agree with that.
So
I don't think that was by mistake.
Yeah, I think you're right, and that it could have been a message, and it's a great question. Next time we talk to Kellen, which might not be until October, but it's a really interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, and I don't think they can really change their approach too much. It's like this is what you do. You install the offense, you learn the offense, you run the offense. There's not too much else you can do about it. But just knowing that Jalen has been disappointed by the way it's gone for him in that aspect.
Yeah,
I don't know. To be fair, though, it goes that way for every quarterback. It's not like it's not that rare. Offensive coordinators don't stick around.
Good ones,
yeah.
Bad ones get fired. Good ones become head coaches.
Yeah. Mediocre ones are bad ones.
Mediocre ones stay too long,
and they're bad.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm sure those conversations have been. I'm sure that's a big part of that. When Kellen says we're going to keep the good, I mean, that could be a product of conversations they've had with Jalen about, look, I want to keep doing this. I want to keep doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm good at this. Let's not get rid of it just because we have it's very possible.
Yeah. A few other Jalen elements from the presser. He was asked about Jalen's ability to run, says he doesn't want to take that away. They kind of took it away a little bit last year. Jalen wasn't as effective. They didn't use it as much.
I also not convinced he was healthy.
Sure. For whatever reason, he wasn't as effective.
Right.
Whether it was injury or whatever, he didn't look the same running the ball.
Combination of both.
Yeah, as he did the year before. We'll hold him to that. We'll see how much they use him in the run game. It's fun. The first snippet of a play the Eagles sent out of Jalen and Saquon, it's purely a read play. Jalen's reading something on the play.
I'm sure that was intentional. Like, social media doesn't do anything like that without the coaches.
It was even if it wasn't intentional, it was approved.
Yeah.
So I think that's an element that we're going to see in this offense. He was asked about Jalen at the line of scrimmage in terms of autonomy. He's not going to have the whole playbook at the line. He doesn't want to have too many options because it's not just about Jalen knowing the play. It's about the other 10 being on the same page. So it sounds like he'll have kind of a limited menu, but he will have the ability to check out of things and to get them in a better look.
Which, for a veteran like him, he's now going into year 5.
And he's had it. It's not new.
No, but he's got to have that.
Mm-hmm.
Has to have that.
Yeah. You mentioned the word clean.
Yeah.
That was also the first thing he said when talking about the importance of being a play caller.
Yeah.
In game, he wants a clear operation and clear and clean operation.
I like how you said clear by mistake instead of clean, but then you change it to clear and clean.
He did say clean.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's that's huge. It's interesting that that's his big go-to word, and it's a good one. I mean, it's all about eliminating clutter. So yeah, which I try to do. You know me.
What else?
I'm very organized.
I'm going through my notes here. I don't think I had anything else written down.
Yeah, that's all I got for Kellen. How long do you think he's here?
It's tricky because one way or the other, he's probably gone in a few years.
2 years max, I feel like.
Probably.
I mean, and if Nick's gone, then he's gone. If he
Is there a third door?
A third door?
We think he's probably the 2 doors right now that we're talking about. One door is he's really good. Offense is really good. He gets hired as a head coach. The other door is everything stinks. Everyone gets fired. He's gone.
Right.
Third door.
New head coach keeps Kellen.
Kellen is a new head coach.
Oh, Kellen is a new head coach. That's I don't know if the offense is so bad that Nick gets fired. It's hard to imagine.
I know it's hard to get to that scenario.
Yeah. Now maybe
I had a lot of questions about that because I think people know that Kellen. I mean, heck, they interviewed him for a head coaching job.
And he, actually, I mean, we didn't mention that he talked about how much he learned about the franchise and Jeff Lurie and Howie. How comfortable he felt here. I don't know how much of that is lip service. It's probably something to it.
Oh, look, we've talked to a bunch of coaches over the years who, I mean, they'll tell you about the Eagles coaching process. And these interviews are marathons.
They're exhausting.
More than any other team in the league, from what I've heard. Is like they keep these guys for like day-long interviews. And then they draw on that information later. It's like an information gathering session for both parties.
Right.
And it didn't land him the head coaching job, but it probably played a really big role in him being back here as the OC.
I'm sure it did. I think they do that to try to see who just can't even take, we're in our hour 14 and we're still peppering you with questions on the whiteboard here. Like, who's got the stamina to mentally just kind of stay sharp. And I think that's something they look for.
I'd fail pretty horribly. Like an all-day interview?
Yeah.
I have to sit in an hour meeting and I'm losing it. Were you able to in class when you were in school, were you able to stay focused for an entire session?
What's that?
Well done.
I struggle with that.
I'm like a fidgeter. So I normally need something in my hand or need to be doodling. Do you think they'd view that negatively in a head coaching interview if you were doodling?
Well, I think that's quite possible.
You see my desk here. I have I have koosh balls. I have toy. I have stuff. I've just toys, and I used to have silly putty on my desk.
I have a Donovan McNabb bobblehead on my desk at the NovaCare.
Did you bring that?
It was just showed up. I don't know where it came from.
I had those little wooden blocks.
I think it might have belonged to Rich Berg at one time.
Okay.
You have blocks at your desk?
Uh-huh.
Wooden blocks?
Yeah.
You just play when you have no work to do?
I'll be writing something or thinking about something, and I need to do something else.
Really?
Yeah.
That never happens with me. But you know what I have to do over there? I'm going to get a photo next time we're over there. I have 300 of those weekly media guides. I got to get rid of them. I have a lot. I don't have any room for anything else. I've started, I don't know if you've noticed, at the media house, I've started to take over another corner of the building. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway. Yeah. As you can imagine, my stuff is very, you put very in line. L and a W on the side of each one in Sharpie. So yeah. I have a process. It makes no sense. You know whether they won or lost the game. Michael Clay. Yeah. The big topic with Michael Clay. And heck, a few years ago, what if I told you a few years ago Michael Clay would be the last man standing? I would not have believed of the coordinators. Good for him. Good for him, man. Yeah. I was wrong. I thought they should have fired him. I was wrong. It's a testament to sometimes believing in someone and giving them the opportunity. Now, I think it's easier with special teams. There's not as much heat on that position, but he really turned it around. Yeah, he really did. It was kind of I remember during last year, I started wondering about that with Brian Johnson. Is there value to, then things got really bad. Right. But is there value to sticking with someone through some of the ups and downs and the learning curve? That's why I thought Matty would be back. Coach he moved on to bigger and better things. He is. Yeah. He's weighing his opportunities right now. There's many. Mm-hmm. There's many. Yeah, but good for Michael, and he's really done really did a great job last year. Most of the questions had to do with the new kickoff rule. Maybe all of them. There might have been a couple about returners, I guess. Mm-hmm. But he was honest. He said, I don't know what it's going to look like, and we're going to just kind of experiment it with it. We've had meetings about it, but you say experiment or experiment? Experiment. Verbiage. He said we're going to try a bunch of different guys. He was asked what kind of traits are you looking for in a person to handle the new kick return responsibility? He said, I don't know. We're just going to throw everybody back there and figure it out, which is an honest answer. He said you try by error a little bit. Yeah. He also made the point, which is a good one. I'm just as concerned as defending it as I am with running it. Yeah, and I think that's a fun, we think about the fun of it all. But for the thing that probably keeps him up at night, he mentioned penalties. He's like, no opportunity for penalties. We can't back our offense up. Yeah. So I think that was a fun look into the way we view it, as it's all fun and games. They can break some big returns versus Michael Clay's don't do anything to screw this up. Yeah. He was asked about Covey because everyone's made a big deal about the return ability that they got in the draft. And, he repeated what he said, look, he's really, really good. He got way better last year. Didn't say he'll be the guy. He's not going to say that. They like competition. And I think you'll see, and I think Britton understands that. I mean, he's an undrafted rookie or undrafted player. And if there's somebody who's better than him, he's gonna get to play. I just think it's gonna be hard to find that, but we'll see. Especially
in year one, and he did bring up the difference between the college game and the pro game, and we saw some of those growing pains with Britton.
Sure did.
As a rookie. So to think that Cooper DeSean or Anais Smith or Will Shipley ends up coming in and it's just great, probably unrealistic.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I'm trying to think what else from him. I asked him specifically about those three returners, and he got into some good detail about them. He just said Cooper's just an exceptional athlete. He can kind of do it all, and you see that his ability to like take it to the house shows that. He brought up his basketball highlights.
And I would recommend anyone who hasn't seen that yet. I don't know if there's anyone out there who hasn't.
I think everyone's seen it.
But yeah, watch Cooper DeJean playing hoops.
Yeah,
it's impressive.
And then with Anais Smith, he talked about like change of direction, just his elusiveness. And then with Will Shipley, he did a really good job of breaking down their unique styles.
He did.
Will Shipley, he said, kind of looks like a running back on those kick returns, just one cut and get upfield. So they have like different. I wonder, without knowing what this kickoff is going to look like, I wonder what kind of guy they want, because they have options. Like if they want a Will Shipley, they have him. If they want an Anais Smith, they have him. If they want a Britton Covey, they have him.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I mean, I just don't know. And like he said, we don't know, but we're no different than 31 other teams that they don't know.
And he also said they're like talking in
that was interesting,
like around the league about it a little bit. I think the paranoia in the NFL does not extend through to special teams.
And he made a reference to the special teams coaching community, like they all talk to each other and exchange ideas and notes and philosophies, which is. Oh, it's interesting.
It's funny. It's like they all got together and like, hey, as long as they're going to let us hang around, let's make sure we keep our jobs. We'll figure out how to do this all together and we'll all just be okay.
That must be it.
Because like, could you imagine?
Defensive coaches would never do that.
Never.
Yeah.
I think it's like,
guys talk to their friends.
Sure.
Former
people
colleagues.
You really, really trust.
Yeah.
But I don't think, I think there's more
even
of a
then,
community.
if they play each other, they don't talk.
Never. Yeah. I think there's more of a community with specialists and special teams coaches.
Seems that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Speaking of
like kickers,
the community. He was asked about those three guys being back. He didn't really go into it, but he's like, yeah, it's great. And it's got to be great. You don't have to worry about that.
Yeah. Braden Mann was maybe the best player on the team the last month of the season.
Good for him. Bad for the team.
Right.
Jake was great last year.
Yeah.
Rick Lovato snapped that football.
He really did. I thought he had his third best year.
Okay.
Yeah.
His rotation looks great on the snaps.
It did. You know what rotation is in aviation? You know what rotation means?
No.
It's when the airplane actually starts lifting into the air. Mm-hmm. That's rotation.
Why?
I don't know. I don't know where the phrase comes from.
Because it's not rotating.
It's rotating up. I don't know. That's the phrase that they use to describe the moment. I'm sure Alex is looking it up right now, but the moment when the plane starts to like, it gets past, I think it's technically past the point where they can abort the takeoff and they start going up.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah.
That's all we have for Michael Clay, right?
Yes. And there's no more coordinators.
There are no more coordinators. I wanted to mention, I listened to the 2510 podcast with Shady and DeSean. They had their much anticipated Chip Kelly episode. Some real feelings there that are still lingering. During it, they called Jason Peters and got his take on Chip. I can't repeat what he said about him.
Not real complimentary.
No. It was a weird period in this team's history. I wasn't here for all of it. You were here for all of it. You kind of look back and like amazed that it all happened.
Yeah, it doesn't fit like anything else. Mm-hmm. And, to me, the really interesting thing is for all of Chip's faults and bad people person, a terrible GM. I mean, this team was 10-6 in 2013, coming off an awful 2012 season. The team was in shambles. Andy got fired. I mean, it was a train wreck, and And Chip did a really good job that first year, but he was only coaching. He still had DeSean and Shady. And then they were 9-3 the next year. So he was 19-9 his first 28 games. And they probably should have won that playoff game at 13. Nick played really well. But then it just it wasn't sustainable, and it collapsed under its own weight. And then he tried to be the GM, and that was, as we know, a catastrophe. It went bad really fast. Yeah. But I thought he did a great job in 2013.
If they could have just hired the scheme and the ideas,
he had some great ideas.
It would have been fine.
But hey, they still serve smoothies at the NovaCare.
Yeah, and look, and a big part of it was they were talking about like the urine tests and the sleep tests. And I understand
the GPS. That's all. Like all that started with Chip.
But they, Shady and DeSean specifically talked about how that they didn't like it. They didn't like to be monitored like that. They felt like they were being treated like little kids.
Right.
And I see both sides of that. I might even be Team Chip on that because I understand the importance of that to their performance. But if you're a veteran in the league and you're Shady McCoy and you're like, I'm the best running back in the league. What do you mean I have to pee in a cup? I'm not doing that. Like, I get it. And I think it was, I think Chip, just the interpersonal skills weren't there. If they could have hired the ideas and the scheme without the person, that might have worked. But I think the person got in his own way.
Yeah. I'll always have the Penn relays, Franklin Field with Chip, watching the Masters hundreds. And he was fascinated by watching like the 80 and 90-year-old guys running their 100-meter dash. Do
you feel like we got robbed of seeing Shady and DeSean play their whole careers here?
No question.
Now, who's to say, like, if you subscribe to, like, the butterfly effect, like, maybe if they don't go, the Chip doesn't get fired, they don't bring in Doug, they don't win. So, like, we don't know what would have happened.
Right.
But just in a vacuum, it sucks that we didn't get to watch those two guys play more here.
Yeah, and it sucks that Shady had to be exiled to Buffalo, where he actually had some really good years, but nobody knew about it. And that could hurt his Hall of Fame chances. I don't know. I think if you're in Philly, you have a much better chance than if you're in Buffalo. That's just the reality.
Yeah.
But there's no question about it.
Yeah. And I can tell how much, like, even DeSean got to come back. It didn't work well. Shady wanted to, right? Like, he hasn't been a secret. Like,
he still wants to.
He might. Yeah. It's always just a shame because those guys were they were at their peak when they were here.
I mean, just the fact that like 90% of what they talk about on their podcast, it's not about like DeSean in Washington or Shady in, Buffalo or wherever else, Kansas City. I mean, all they talk about is, because they were together here, but
sure,
that's all they talk about.
But they'll be remembered.
Absolutely.
As that. I mean, Shady came back here and retired for a reason. DeSean came back here and played for a reason.
DeSean they were both so good. DeSean's the best deep ball tracker I've ever seen. And Shady he was a beast, and he was a beast late in games. His late game, he just never got tired. He was so good in the fourth quarter of close games.
Yeah. If you're wondering, they are still not cool with Chip.
Yeah.
DeSean,
I'm not sure we had it, but yeah.
Yeah, DeSean was basically like, Chip, don't come near me. He said some unkind words.
Yeah. Well, they teased it a couple of weeks ago. They started talking about him, and they just said, "Oh, we got the Chip episode coming up," and they just started cracking up. He's like, "Oh yeah," Shady's like, "Yeah, we're not going to say any more because we got the whole Chip," and then he, said a lot more. But it's a really they have great chemistry together, and it's definitely worth watching.
Yeah. It's just a fascinating period in this team's history.
It is.
That feels like a fever dream
in a lot of ways, but like some good came out of it.
Sure. Yeah, it was good for us and content.
It was
wild.
And where's he now? He's back at it. He's at Ohio State. Chip.
Oh yeah, right.
With Ryan, is Ryan Day still the head coach? I think he is. Who is his quarterback's coach here for 1 year? I think
he's the OC at Ohio State.
Yeah, so he quit head coach as UCLA, where he's obviously not wanted anymore. Now he's an offensive coordinator at OSU, where my dad once taught biology and physiology. My dad and Chip are kind of colleagues.
Sure.
About 80 years apart.
Yeah.
All right.
Anything else?
No.
Want to mention the schedule, it looks like, comes out next Wednesday.
Always a fun day.
Fun day. Looking forward to that. So we'll be ready to react.
Who do you think they're going to open with?
It is nice, one going into it.
Yeah, 1 out of 17.
Yeah. All right. We want to mention, if you enjoy the podcast, please do us a favor, rate and subscribe wherever you get your pods. If you're watching on YouTube, please do us a favor, click the like button, subscribe there as well. Real quick, what's the best concert you've seen in the last week?
Well, between Sing Us Home and Oncom, I've seen about 40 bands, but last night I saw the Black Crowes.
Mm-hmm. I'm a big fan.
I didn't know that.
Oh, we've talked about them. I cherish our conversations.
I like the Black Crowes. I never loved the Black Crowes, but last night it was one of the best things I've ever seen. They played a very small room, World Cafe Live, the night after playing at the Met, which is huge. I was on the rail, so I was right at the stage, right in front of Nico, the guitar player, who's just one of the best musicians I've ever seen in my life. Chris's voice is good as ever. The band is locked in. Sven, the bass player, is a beast. They're incredible. And being that close to a band that's that good live was a really cool experience. And they played a bunch. They played like 3 songs from the new record, and then they played, Hard to Handle and Jealous Again and She Talks to Angels. And, they played like their 5 biggest hits to finish the set. It was mind-blowing.
Awesome.
Yeah.
All right. That's all we have. We'll be back with you guys next week. Everyone have a great weekend. This has been Eagle Eye presented by DeSean.